11 major pieces of legislation. That's how many bills Speaker Mike Johnson has passed, mostly with the help of Democrats, since being handed the gavel at the House of Representatives. In an exclusive piece by D.C. correspondent Chris Bedford at theblaze.com/Bedford, he finds that Speaker Johnson has accomplished more with Democrats than Republicans to get legislation through the Washington machinery. Chris Bedford is Blaze senior editor for politics, and he joins us now to explore his analysis. So, Chris, let's just dive into it. Is Johnson really a Republican speaker, or is he better thought of as a speaker for the uniparty?
I would say he's definitely better thought of as a speaker for the uniparty. He hasn't passed any major legislation, essentially, on a partisan basis, at least, not with more Republican votes than Democrats. In fact, there's been major bills where Democrats have outnumbered Republicans in 10 times for the last 11 months, plus a little special one he did to pick out George Santos out of the GOP, which was a strange move that had more Democrats backing it, of course, than Republicans. Hakeem Jeffries, what made me write this piece was the House Minority Leader, supposedly. Hakeem Jeffries had a quote in the New York Times where he said that the MAGA Republicans in the House of Representatives haven't done a darn thing of their agenda. And where's the lie? I don't know where it is. Whether in the first few weeks that he was Speaker, he passed the first continuing resolution, majority Democrat votes, or more Democrat votes than Republican votes. And that pattern has continued every single step of the way, with further CRs, with funding for foreign governments, with more funding for foreign governments. Each time, he strips the Republican asks, the conservative asks. For example, on the National Defense Authorization Act, which is basically a Republican sacred cow, you're not allowed to touch it. There was a number of conservative measures that were included in that to try and push back against some of the woke Pentagon garbage that we've been seeing more and more and more. All of those got stripped out in order to gain those Democrat votes. He loses Republican votes. The big test of his is going to be at the end of this month. If he ends up once again suspending House rules and passing an omnibus package with a Democrat majority on the yes votes, I think his days as Speaker might be numbered.
Chris, you look so somber today without the color and the tie. Is this your message to us about the uniparty going on here?
Yeah, it's my dark green. I tell you what, the weather here this past week in D.C. If I didn't have responsibilities, wife and kids, I would have been on a plane to Edinburgh because it basically is the same. And every single day, I've gone from summer country is over. We're no longer listening to Turnpike Troubadours. I am on to full-on sad Scottish music every day, and a pint as soon as we're done broadcasting. It's a mood.
That is funny because I almost missed that. Here in Dallas, we are now to the part where the weather is actually good for 5 seconds.
Yeah.
So
we're there.
Stay there.
Just fly here.
So to stick with the somber question before we declare this a full-on funeral, is there anything that the speaker can do to get out of this situation? I mean, is he just done? Is there anything he could do to save himself as speaker at this point?
Yeah, I think his goose was more cooked a few months ago. But right now, Republicans have come to the realization that there's going to be potentially a Republican president being inaugurated in January. They do not want a repeat of that speaker fight. A couple of them, of course, do. You've got the congressmen and congresswomen who just want to go on TV and throw bombs all day, and those people will try to mess things up. But they're not going to have the broad support that they had in the overthrow of Kevin McCarthy. What the speaker could do is it's going to depend pretty largely on how the November election goes. If he gets more padding in the House of Representatives, if more Republicans are joining his ranks, which I think seems fairly likely, if at the same time you get a Republican Senate, which also looks fairly likely, and if you get that trifecta for the GOP with Donald Trump as president, well, then it's going to change the calculus completely. Then saying no to Democrats' demands basically means a 3-day shutdown. It's the end of December until January 3rd when Congress comes back. The government at that time, the employees are basically gone. New Year's Day is on a Wednesday, which in Washington, D.C., means no one's coming to work on Monday and Tuesday. And at that point, why bother on Thursday and Friday? It would be a blip. At the same time, it would be as far from any election as you can basically possibly get. And in a country that seems to forget assassination attempts within 2 weeks, no one's going to remember that shutdown in 2 years. So that would be, if he had those reinforcements, the time for him to fight and say, no, we're not doing this. And we'll meet you again when Republicans are in charge. I'm sorry, I'm so popular in my somber mood.
you look.
It would be his time. He must be calling me to actually do this.
It's so funny.
If he passes 2 minibuses, he can't.
Well, Chris, I love it. We'll go ahead and pencil your time off over New Year's anyway. We'll get that cleared right now for you. Don't worry. But you are going to have to work next week because we have the vice presidential debate coming up next Tuesday. Blaze TV is going to have coverage. It's going to start at 7 p.m. Central, 8 p.m. Eastern. But let's go ahead and listen to Tim Walz because he was on MSNBC talking about the border crisis.
Do you think it's a crisis what's happening at the border?
Well, I think it could be fixed. I think crisis is, we certainly have these. I don't want people living outside Minnesota right now. I think there's the humanity piece of this. And then there's the right that every sovereign nation has the right to control its borders as we should. More could be done, but they're doing nothing. Congress is doing nothing. The president is asking for more aid for Border Patrol, not getting it.
But do you think the border's secure?
I think the border with the folks who do the work down there are doing a great job. Could we do better? Absolutely.
I think we're probably going to hear a lot of that sound from Tim Walz on Tuesday night. But Chris, my question to you is, does anybody actually care about the VP debate itself?
I'm torn on this question. I'm trying to figure it out because on the one hand, you've got some undecideds left. On the other hand, those people who haven't yet made up a decision on if they prefer Kamala Harris to Donald Trump also have a strong overlap with the people who will not be spending their Tuesday night watching a VP debate. However, there's going to be things that are amplified from that VP debate, caused by the fact that Kamala Harris has operated basically a bunker campaign. J.D. Vance and Tim Walz has had to follow. Because if Kamala's incapable of explaining her strategy and her policies, then of course you can't have Walz out there trying to explain policies that don't really exist and are frankly inexplicable. To compare that, J.D. Vance has been out there all the time. He's omnipresent. He's done more interviews with newspapers, with cable stations, with local stations than any other person on those out of the four, by quite a bit too. So it's a lot for Tim Walz out there to lose, and anything that happens will be amplified. Also, Democrats have put a lot of balls into a couple different images for Walz. One is that he's a combat veteran and a soldier. It's kind of like the John Kerry model. They've really had to back off of that. Every aspect of it has been poked holes in, and his comrades have come out and said, this is bogus. They've tried to put him forward as a family man and as a new symbol of infertility problems. And that story fell apart really inconveniently. Walz, as opposed to being Coach Walz and America's dad, is being exposed more and more as a pretty calculated liar. And I've got a piece coming out in the Beltway Brief on Monday, digging into just some of those lies and how Vance can get there. And since there's been so little noise in the political arena from Harris and Walz themselves, anything they say at this point will be echoed. And you may end up with viral moments like they're eating the dogs, they're eating the cats, which has penetrated popular culture, is now part of a joke. I mean, you didn't have to watch the debate to have heard the catchy song on Instagram or Facebook, wherever you are. And those are the moments that Republicans benefit from.